Welcome everyone to Half History Will Travel. I am your host, the Wilder Historian, and in this episode I wanted to focus on a political battle in the 1830s, Andrew Jackson's Bank War. In my videos on Florida and Iowa statehood, the delegates to those state constitutional conventions debated banking practices, so I thought this video would help enlighten where a lot of those battles stemmed from. The debate about United States banking practices had been present since the founding of the country. It would eventually create the Bank of the United States to act as many things, but probably most importantly as a regulatory system for state and local banks within the United States. The bank was rechartered in 1806 for 20 years, making the renewal come about in 1836. Andrew Jackson would be president at that time, and he would do political battle with the president of the National Bank, Nicholas Biddle. Biddle was born into an affluent family of Philadelphia and educated at the University of Pennsylvania and at Princeton. At 18, he was made the private secretary to the American minister in Paris. During the War of 1812, he helped to get war loans for the United States to help fight that conflict. In 1823, at the age of 36, Biddle became president of the Bank of the United States, replacing the retiring Langdon Cheves. The bank was the largest corporation in the country. It was the creditor of the state banks and handled the federal government's transactions. Its currency was legal tender, unlike state bank currency, and could be exchanged at any time for gold or silver. It gave out loans to the state banks, local banks, businesses, and individuals. In the early days of the nation, it helped create a secure financial foundation, and it had only grown. The bank handled virtually all foreign exchange transactions and was fast evolving into a modern central bank because it had the ability to expand or contract the money supply depending on what the economy needed. As stated earlier, probably its most important job was to make sure that the state banks had enough hard money on hand to back up their paper currency, ensuring that those banks were solvent. The way in which the National Bank combined public functions with private profit inevitably exposed it to criticism. The federal government had very little control over the bank, and it loaned money to prominent politicians. However, it did not just give loans to supporters. Ironically, it gave loans to its detractors. Two other things went against the bank. One, the Panic of 1819, which had been partially caused by bad business practices on the part of the bank, left a sour taste in the mouth of many Americans. The other problem was with President Jackson personally. In his younger days, he had dabbled in speculation of land and promissory notes, and nearly became financially ruined. This gave him a great distrust for banks and debt. He would remark to Biddle that, "I do not dislike your bank any more than all banks." Despite its problems, the bank had many supporters. Jackson, in his first annual message in December 1829, complained that the bank hadn't established a uniform and sound currency. This statement was completely false. The bank's currency circulated at or very near par in all parts of the country. His accusations fell on deaf ears because Americans had dealings with the bank and knew that its money held up in value. In his second annual message, he attacked the bank again and even suggested that it should be an arm of the Treasury. However, having it a part of the federal government would mean that politics would play even more of a role in its decisions. Many politicians at that time thought it better to simply put some regulations on the bank rather than bring it into the government. Jackson attacked it as a private enterprise that had received unjust privileges and artificial monopoly unresponsive to the government or the public. The democratic ideals of the public having a say in the government and the country's money did not correlate with how the National Bank dealt with its loans and other transactions. Biddle now had some tough decisions to make. Jackson was accusing the National Bank's Kentucky branches of interfering with the elections in that state and ousting Democratic candidates. The divide became more prominent between pro-bank and anti-bank voters. To hopefully quell the tension, Biddle put Democrats on the bank's board of directors. He also made preparations to pay off the national debt, which Jackson was a huge supporter of. However, it was still a tricky situation. Biddle began to make a significant political move. If he could get the bank rechartered by Congress 4 years before its charter expired and before Jackson ran for a second term, he may be able to save the bank. He reasoned that Jackson wouldn't risk vetoing the bank's recharter in a significant election year with pro-bank candidates so strongly positioned in various elections. In July 1832, Congress voted to recharter the bank for 15 years after its 1836 expiration. It seemed as though Biddle had won. It was around this time that Jackson stated that the bank is trying to kill me, but I will kill it. On July 10, 1832, according to some historians, Jackson issued the most important presidential veto in American history. In his veto statement, he outlined 3 major reasons for his actions. 1, he complained about foreign stockholders in the bank. However, that was not an issue. Those stockholders could not vote their shares, and it was in the best interest of the United States to have foreign investors because that gave them an incentive to see the United States succeed. 2, he stated that even though the Supreme Court judged the bank to be constitutional, the executive and legislative branches of the government could decide for themselves what laws were constitutional or not. The 3rd reason was his greatest political defense to win the people to his side. He declared the bank a threat to the sovereignty of the people. He stated, "The rich and powerful too often bend the acts of the government to their selfish purposes. Distinctions in society will always exist under every just government. But when the laws undertake to add to these natural and just advantages artificial distinctions, to grant titles, gratuities, and exclusive privileges, to make the rich richer and the potent more powerful, the humble members of society, the farmers, mechanics, and laborers, who have neither the time nor the means of securing like favors to themselves, have a right to complain of the injustice of their government." Removing the federal funds would hasten the demise of the bank, but he would have trouble finding someone in his cabinet to do it. Over the next several months, Jackson would replace 2 secretaries of the Treasuries who would not remove the federal deposits out of the bank. He finally found that Attorney General Roger Taney, acting as Secretary of the Treasury, would simply not put federal deposits into the bank, but would still pay bills with funds in the bank. This way, the economy wouldn't suffer from an abrupt removal of funds, but Jackson would get his way. Furthermore, deposits would now be put into select banks around the country, chosen for their political alliances rather than their solvency. The Second Bank of the United States would fold, but that would not be the end of the story. Jackson's bank war had far-reaching implications. Creditors and financial houses began to fail in 1837, in part due to the bank war. The crisis had causes both foreign and domestic. It reflected the chronic shortage of capital in the United States and the country's dependence on inflows of foreign money. By paying off the national debt, Jackson had returned capital to Europe, and by destroying the Bank of the United States, he had made it harder to control the domestic money supply. Like the boom that preceded it, the panic manifested the extent to which America, even then, was enmeshed in a global economy. The Panic of 1837, although partially caused by Jackson, would help lead to Martin Van Buren, Jackson's successor, only serving 1 term as president, and it would unseat many Democrats in the upcoming elections because the voters took their wrath out on those in charge, and the American people would elect a Whig and a war hero as president, William Henry Harrison. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope this video helped to shine light on a critical moment in United States history. Thank you all again. Have a great day.